this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
The palace expected a quiet christening, a sacred family moment wrapped in tradition, prayer, and carefully chosen smiles. Instead, Prince Charles turned it into a royal earthquake. With one confirmation, he placed Catherine at the center of the entire ceremony and left Camilla standing outside the circle of influence. What should have been a peaceful celebration became a public signal of trust, power, and rejection. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew every person in that room understood the weight of what was coming. He had seen ceremonies heal the crown before, but he had also seen them expose hidden fractures. A royal christening, the church ceremony, where a royal child is baptized and welcomed before family, faith, and tradition, was supposed to offer calm. This one carried something sharper. It would show who held trust, influence, and loss. Catherine stood still when the confirmation came. Charles had confirmed her as the sole decision-maker, giving her final authority over guest approval, ceremonial details, family roles, and protocol order. Protocol order meant the planned sequence of who stood where, who entered when, and whose place carried meaning before the public heard a word. She accepted it with grace, but the honor pressed against her heart. Every choice would be studied by the family, questioned by the public, and measured against buried tension. Camilla felt the blow before anyone explained it. The queen consort had expected a shared voice in the planning, or at least the dignity of being consulted before the final seal fell. Instead, she watched the room shift around Catherine, and the silence told her everything. This was not an oversight. This was a deliberate removal from the center of a family moment she believed she had earned the right to shape. Charles set the file down with a care that made the room colder. He paused, looked toward Catherine, and said her judgment would stand above all other opinions on the christening. William heard the words and understood the deeper message. The king had not simply trusted his daughter-in-law. He had chosen her steady hand over Camilla's influence in a matter filled with memory, faith, and dynastic meaning. Catherine did not smile. William did not speak. Camilla did not look away. The decision had landed, but the reason behind it remained locked behind another door. And as Catherine stepped into the role Charles had handed her, the people closest to the christening realized this was not just about one royal child. It was about the future shape of the monarchy. A christening is supposed to soften a royal family. It brings generations together, places old wounds beneath ancient vows, and lets the palace pretend that unity is stronger than memory. But this time, every person around the ceremony carried something unspoken. Catherine had duty. Charles had guilt. William had suspicion. Camilla had pride. And none of them could enter the room without feeling the decision already dividing them. Catherine felt the weight of the role before anyone said her name again. This was not only about arranging a ceremony, a christening, the sacred service, where a child is baptized before family and church, carried deep royal meaning because it connected faith, bloodline, and public duty in one moment. For her, the ceremony had to feel calm, disciplined, and protected from drama. If it failed, people would not only blame the plan, they would blame her judgment. Charles saw the christening as a chance to restore dignity after months of private tension. The king believed the family needed one moment that felt steady, one event where old wounds did not steal attention from the child at the center of it. He trusted Catherine because she understood restraint. She did not chase power. She held it carefully, and that mattered to him more than anyone in the room wanted to admit. William supported Catherine, but the prince could already see the danger forming around her. He knew Camilla would not take the decision lightly. He knew his wife had been placed directly in the path of the queen consort's anger, and that thought tightened something inside him. Catherine had accepted duty, but William understood the cost. She was being asked to protect a sacred family moment while standing in the middle of a family storm. Camilla felt humiliated in a way she could not easily hide. She had expected influence, even if it came softly. A small approval, a private suggestion, a ceremonial voice. Instead, the queen consort watched a senior aide move her briefing folder away from the christening table and replace it with Catherine's approved schedule. That simple action cut through the room like a blade. Camilla did not need a speech to understand what had happened. She had been moved aside. Charles avoided Camilla's eyes when the folder shifted. That silence told the room more than any official explanation could. The king had made his choice, and now everyone had to live under it. Catherine stayed composed. William stayed close. Camilla stayed still. But beneath that stillness, the pressure was rising. And yet, this pain had not begun with the folder. It had been building long before that quiet removal. To understand why Charles drew such a hard line, the story must move backward to the moment when trust around the christening first began to crack. The palace did not break in public first. It broke in a smaller place, behind softened voices and polished doors, where one conversation changed the temperature of everything. Weeks before the confirmation, Catherine entered a private chapel meeting, believing they were discussing prayers, godparents, and tradition. She left, knowing the christening had become something else, a stage where influence could be claimed, tested, and quietly stolen. Catherine noticed the change before anyone tried to explain it. The christening order, the planned sequence of prayers, arrivals, family positions, and ceremonial roles had been adjusted in a way that pulled attention away from the child. Camilla had pushed for her preferred family representatives to stand closer to the ceremonial center, and that mattered, because royal placement is never random. It tells the family, the church, and the public who is being lifted and who is being pushed aside. Camilla spoke softly, but the queen consort's meaning was sharp. She treated the change as a harmless gesture, a small sign of family unity. But Catherine understood the deeper move. This was not only about where people stood, it was about who shaped the memory of the day. Catherine stayed polite, yet her voice carried steel when she said the ceremony had to remain sacred, not strategic. Camilla smiled coldly, and that smile changed the room. Catherine carried the revised seating plan with her long after the meeting ended. William found her alone later, holding the paper as if it had become heavier in her hands. The prince did not need a full explanation. He saw the hurt in her face before she turned it into control. Catherine told him that the christening was being pulled away from the child, and William understood why that frightened her. If the ceremony became a contest of influence, then innocence would be lost before the first vow was spoken. Charles learned the truth through a documented chapel account sent by a senior aide after the meeting. The aide made clear that the proposed change had not come through the proper channel, meaning it had not been approved by the person given authority over that part of the ceremony. The king read that detail once, then again. He knew someone had tried to shape the christening without Catherine's consent, and he knew the damage was bigger than one altered line. Charles kept the chapel notes in his private red box overnight. A red box is the locked case used to carry important royal papers for the monarch's review, and this file stayed with him because the choice before him was no longer simple. The king could protect comfort, or he could protect trust. By morning, his decision had hardened. Camilla did not yet know how completely the door had closed. Catherine did. William did. Charles did. The chapel meeting had created the fracture, but when the queen consort learned her influence had been blocked, the quiet tension became impossible to contain. The confrontation that followed turned that fracture into a royal fault line. There are palace arguments that echo through corridors, and there are arguments that become dangerous because nobody raises their voice. This was the second kind. Catherine and Camilla faced each other in a private room, with no cameras, no guests, and no ceremonial smiles to hide behind. What passed between them was sharper than anger. It was the truth finally stepping out of the shadows. Catherine requested the meeting after learning that parts of the christening plan had been challenged outside her approval. The christening plan meant the agreed list of roles, prayers, family positions, and ceremonial order for the sacred service. That mattered, because this was not a normal family gathering. Every place, every role, and every name carried meaning. If one person could change it quietly, then Catherine's authority meant nothing. Camilla entered with control on her face, but the queen consort could not hide the sting beneath it. She knew Catherine had asked for the room to be cleared, and that alone felt like a warning. Both women had built their place in the monarchy through discipline, patience, and endurance. Yet now they stood across from each other because one ceremony had exposed the fear neither wanted to name. Catherine kept her voice calm, but the calm made her words harder. She told Camilla the christening could not become a contest of visibility. The child had to remain at the center, not adult pride, not family rank, not old resentment. Camilla answered that she had a right to be included, and the frustration in her voice carried more than anger. The queen consort sounded wounded, almost cornered, as if the family she had fought to enter was now quietly deciding how far she could come. Catherine placed the amended order on the table. An amended order meant the changed version of the official plan, the one showing who had been moved closer and who had gained prominence. She asked who authorized the changes. Camilla did not answer immediately. That pause filled the room with more force than a confession. Catherine saw it. Camilla knew she saw it. And in that silence, the battle stopped pretending to be about ceremony. William entered only after the conversation ended. The prince found Catherine still beside the table, her face composed but her hurt not fully hidden. Camilla passed him without looking back, and he understood at once that something final had happened. He moved closer to Catherine, not to rescue her, but to stand with her before the storm arrived. The confrontation changed everything. Charles could no longer balance feelings, soften edges, or hope private persuasion would hold the family together. The christening had become a matter of authority, not courtesy. And once the king understood that, the next decision would not be gentle. King Charles had spent a lifetime learning that royal power is rarely loud. It is a signature placed in silence, a chair left empty, a name removed from a list before anyone knows it was there. But this time, the decision cost him more than procedure. To protect the christening, he had to wound Camilla. To protect Catherine, he had to expose where his trust now truly rested. Charles reviewed the final christening file with a small group of senior household officials, and everyone understood the mood before he spoke. The final christening file meant the complete approved plan for the ceremony, including guests, family positions, prayers, and order of duty. This mattered because once the file was approved, the household would stop debating and start obeying. The king made it clear that Catherine's approval would be the only approval required from that point forward. Charles did not present the decision as punishment. He framed it as protection of ceremony, tradition, stability, and the child at the center of it all. The monarchy needed one sacred moment, untouched by rivalry. The family needed one day where discipline mattered more than pride. Yet everyone in the room could feel the personal meaning beneath his careful words. Catherine had handled pressure with restraint. Camilla had pushed for influence. The difference had become impossible for him to ignore. Charles felt the pain of what he was doing, but the king did not step back from it. He knew excluding Camilla would cut deeply, because the queen consort had expected to be included in a ceremony carrying family weight. Still, he had watched Catherine stay calm when others tested her authority. He had watched her defend the christening without turning the fight into revenge. That quiet strength gave him the answer he needed, even if the answer hurt. Camilla received the news in a brief private update, and she sat motionless for several seconds. The queen consort did not ask first about the prayers, the schedule, or the guest list. She asked whether William knew before she did. That question revealed the wound beneath the dignity. She was not only upset about being excluded, She feared the future king, and Catherine had already become the trusted center while she was being moved to the edge. Charles signed the instruction and placed his pen down carefully. That small gesture sealed Catherine's control over the christening. A courtier noticed the final decision column and understood the message at once. Camilla's name was absent. Catherine's name stood alone beside every major ceremonial approval. No dramatic speech was needed. The paper had spoken for the palace. The order moved through the household, and the consequences began almost instantly. Staff adjusted their instructions. Folders changed hands. Conversations stopped when Camilla entered. What had been private pain now became palace reality, and the queen consort was forced to face a christening that would proceed without her hand on the wheel. The cruelest palace blows are often delivered politely. No shouting, no scandalous hallway scene, just a quiet update, a revised schedule, and the sudden realization that a door once open has closed. For Camilla, the new reality arrived on a single page. Catherine would decide. Catherine would approve. Catherine would shape the christening. And the queen consort would be expected to smile as though nothing had been taken from her. Camilla read the revised christening plan and understood the damage at once. The revised christening plan meant the updated ceremony schedule, showing who controlled final choices, who had speaking roles, and who held approval over family placement. This mattered because royal ceremonies do not only honor tradition, they show power, they show trust, they show who belongs near the center and who has quietly been moved away. Senior staff passed the update through the household with careful faces and lowered voices. Catherine's name stood as the sole authority on final arrangements, while Camilla's role had been reduced to attendance and ceremonial support. That meant the queen consort could be present, could smile, could stand where she was placed, but she would not control guest placement, private family access, or the order of participation. The door had not slammed. It had closed softly, which made it worse. Camilla sat alone after the briefing, wounded by how cleanly the decision removed her from influence. She did not rage. She did not demand the room back. She simply stayed still, as if movement would make the humiliation real. The queen consort had expected at least one final opening, one small sign that her voice still mattered. Instead, she held a paper that proved the christening would continue, without her hand shaping it. Catherine heard about Camilla's reaction and felt no triumph. She had won authority, but victory did not feel sweet when duty had created another family wound. Catherine knew why the decision mattered. The christening had to stay focused on faith, family, and the child, not on adult rivalries. Still, she understood the human cost. Protecting peace sometimes hurts the very people standing closest to it. A staff member quietly removed one of Camilla's suggested names from the guest draft after Catherine declined the addition without hesitation. The guest draft was the working list of people invited or considered for the ceremony. And every name carried meaning because access to a royal christening signaled closeness. Catherine's refusal was not cruel. It was firm. She would not let the ceremony become a stage for influence. William told Catherine the decision would be read as a signal, not a schedule change. The prince understood how the palace would whisper and how the public would later judge. Catherine listened, then answered that the ceremony had to be protected anyway. Her calm did not erase the pressure. It revealed it. Camilla tried to regain her footing, but the new reality had already settled around her. Catherine carried the burden. William saw the risk. And before the world could react, Catherine and Charles entered the private moment that gave the decision its emotional meaning. After all the signatures, whispers, and wounded glances, the heart of the story came down to two people in one quiet room. Charles did not speak like a king at first. Catherine did not answer like someone seeking power. There were no aids to soften the silence, no protocol to hide behind. Only a father-in-law, a future queen, and the burden of a family ceremony that had become a test of trust. Charles invited Catherine to speak privately, after the final christening order had been confirmed. The final christening order meant the approved command for how the ceremony would be handled, who would hold authority, and whose decisions would no longer be challenged. This mattered, because the order did more than organize a family event. It placed Catherine at the center of royal trust, and showed the household that the king believed her judgment could protect what others had nearly turned into a struggle for influence. Catherine entered expecting instruction, but Charles offered something far heavier. The king did not lecture her. He did not ask her to soften the decision. He told her why he had chosen her. He said the christening had to be protected from rivalry, and for a moment his voice carried the sadness of a man who knew protection had come at a personal cost. Camilla had been hurt, and he did not pretend otherwise. Charles looked older when he admitted that pain. The monarch understood the queen consort would feel ignored, even wounded. But he also understood that Catherine had not asked for power to punish anyone. She had defended the ceremony because the child deserved peace, because faith deserved dignity, and because the family needed one moment where duty stood above pride. That was why the choice mattered. Not because Camilla had lost, because Catherine had stayed steady. Catherine answered softly, but every word carried strength. She told Charles she never wanted to defeat anyone. She only wanted to keep the ceremony pure. The king listened, and his guarded expression softened. Catherine's honesty gave him what the documents never could prove, that he had not handed authority to ambition. He had handed it to restraint. Charles then said the future must be shaped by people who understood control, silence, and sacrifice. Catherine knew he was speaking about more than the christening. He was speaking about the monarchy after him, about the kind of crown William would one day inherit, and about the role she would have to carry beside him. The meaning settled between them like a vow. Catherine accepted the responsibility and closed the folder herself. That simple act said the matter was finished. Charles did not stop her. He let the silence confirm what words no longer needed to explain. The decision had found its emotional center. But beyond those walls, the palace was already bracing. One private christening order was about to become a national judgment, and the world would soon decide what Charles's choice truly revealed. By morning, the christening was no longer just a royal family matter. It had become a headline, a symbol, and a warning. The public saw what the palace had tried to control. Catherine standing at the center of the future, Camilla pushed to the edge, and Charles choosing silence over explanation. One front page captured it all, with brutal simplicity, and suddenly, the private wound belonged to everyone. Catherine felt the pressure before the first public comment reached the palace. A London newspaper had placed her at the center of its front page beside the phrase, "sole hand on the christening," while Camilla was described as left outside the final circle. That phrase mattered, because the final circle meant the small group trusted with the most sensitive family decisions. In royal life, being outside that circle was not just embarrassing, it was a message. Broadcasters seized the story almost instantly. They framed the decision as a major shift in royal influence, saying the christening had become a test of dynastic continuity, which means the passing of royal identity and tradition from one generation to the next. That mattered, because the ceremony was not only about faith. It was also about who the crown trusted to protect its future. And now the answer looked painfully clear. Catherine moved carefully through the noise, knowing the public now saw her authority before they saw the child at the heart of the ceremony. She had wanted peace, not a spotlight. She had wanted order, not victory. Yet every mention of her name made the decision feel larger, sharper, more permanent. William saw the strain in her face and stayed close, because the prince understood what public approval could do. It could lift someone up, but it could also turn them into a target. Camilla watched the coverage in silence. The queen consort was wounded not only by criticism, but by how quickly people understood she had been ignored. No official statement needed to spell it out. No palace aide had to explain the meaning. The public saw Catherine elevated and Camilla sidelined, and that simple reading cut deeper than any headline. A small crowd gathered near Buckingham Palace, and one woman held a handwritten sign reading, "Let Catherine lead." That single moment turned private palace judgment into public endorsement. It showed that some people did not see the decision as cruelty. They saw it as clarity. Catherine had become, in their eyes, the steady hand. Camilla had become the reminder of tension the monarchy wanted to move beyond. William reminded Catherine that the ceremony belonged to faith and family, not headlines. The prince spoke with quiet force, and she steadied herself because he was right. The world could take sides. The papers could shout. But the child still deserved peace. Charles watched the reaction without rushing to explain himself. The king knew silence could look cold, but he also knew the decision had already spoken. As the public took sides, the monarchy faced one final question. Would this moment be remembered as division or as renewal? When the noise finally settled, what remained was not the scandal of who had been excluded, but the deeper truth of who had been trusted. In the end, the christening did not become a story about jewelry, seating plans, or wounded pride. It became a story about judgment. Charles looked at the people around him and chose the person he believed could carry the ceremony without turning it into a battlefield. Catherine did not win because she demanded power. She was trusted because she showed she could hold power without letting it consume her. Catherine guided the christening forward with quiet control, and the ceremony found its dignity again. The christening meant the sacred service, where a child is baptized and welcomed into faith, family, and royal tradition. This mattered because the monarchy needed one moment that did not feel poisoned by rivalry. It needed order. It needed calm. It needed proof that the crown could still protect something innocent when everything around it felt divided. Charles watched that order hold, and the king understood what his decision had truly done. His confirmation had become more than an instruction. It had become a defining signal that Catherine was no longer only admired by the public or protected by William. She had become a guardian of family tradition, trusted to carry sensitive moments without turning them into personal victory. That kind of trust was rare. That kind of trust changed everything. Camilla attended with composure, but the queen consort could not escape the quiet distance around her. She was not destroyed. She was not publicly shamed. Yet the consequence was clear in every careful glance and every controlled pause. Influence once assumed was not influence guaranteed. Camilla had believed closeness to Charles would keep her near the center of family decisions. This christening proved the center had moved. William watched Catherine carry the responsibility with calm strength, and the prince felt pride mixed with concern. He knew the world would call her steady. He knew the palace would call her useful, but he also knew the weight placed on her shoulders would not disappear when the ceremony ended. Catherine had protected the day, but she had also stepped deeper into the burden of the future. Charles did not reverse the order. He did not soften the wording. He did not offer Camilla a late role to ease the pain. The king allowed the decision to stand exactly as written, and that made the message final. Catherine's authority over the christening became a royal verdict in itself. Restraint, loyalty, and emotional discipline had become the qualities he trusted most. The monarchy emerged bruised but clearer. Camilla remained present, but she was no longer central to this sacred family moment. Catherine was not crowned by the decision, but she was unmistakably elevated. Charles confirmed more than a christening plan. He confirmed the future emotional direction of the crown. There was no unfinished mystery left behind this decision. Catherine was chosen, Camilla was passed over, and the monarchy revealed exactly where its trust now lives. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.